Grand Risings! Hope you're having a blessed day. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday and all the things. Today my video is about a typical British subject, the weather. I thought I'd be a normo for a change. So it's a tree that I can see, and there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, maybe 4 pigeons, and they're like clinging on to the branches, like it's quite cute. But yeah, the weather. I have been thinking about the weather a lot lately, which I don't tend to do actually, if I'm honest. As much as I have been over the last couple of days. And it started... I think it was like a couple of days ago, I happened to notice that there was quite a lot of people complaining about the weather. And it being cold. It was like, actually, it's not that cold for December. Like, why? Like, it could be a lot colder. And I suppose it just felt like it didn't matter, like, what the actual weather was. People had it, like, in their head. It's December, it's a bit cold. It's colder outside than it is inside. So I must complain about it. Like this automatic knee-jerk reaction to, oh, it's December, so let's complain about the weather. Oh yes, it's December, so it must be cold. But actually that particular day, it wasn't that cold. And then there was torrential downpours, which was quite, it wasn't pleasant to be out in, I won't lie. But the flip side of that was that when I got home, when me and my kids got home, we were out walking and we'd been somewhere, and then we was on the bus. So sitting on the bus when you were wet is never very nice. But when we got home, it was so nice to take off like our wet clothes and like get all cozy and snuggly. That was the flip side of it being wet. So it's like there's always, a positive. But it made me kind of think about if you was to be outside in it all the time, and how that would dictate what, how you moved and how you lived, and how, I suppose it didn't really matter to us much about being wet for like, an hour, because we had the knowledge that we were going home to take our wet stuff off and put dry stuff on. And I was contemplating it. I've been contemplating just the weather in general and thinking about how we look at it differently depending on what our situation is and what our circumstances are. And it kind of took me back. I was sitting here yesterday, dawning, doing my meditation, looking up at the branches against the sky. Like the sky, it was early, so the sky hadn't quite yet got to its full blue. It was dark blue. And seeing the branches against the sky, and I was thinking about being a kid and how fun winter is when you're a kid, how you use the weather as almost like a play tool, well, I did anyway, and when I was a kid, like other kids did. I don't know what kids do now. I suppose they all just sit on their Xboxes and play in pretend weather. And I suppose I was thinking about, like, you know, when it used to get frosty, how I'd like skid along the floor and pretend I was ice skating. And you know, when it got really cold and you could do the smoke and the steam and pretend it was smoking. Or you could pretend you was a dragon if you weren't quite so naughty. I use that word very loosely. There is no naughty. Yeah, you know, and how like the snow was more fun, and as an adult, snow is not fun. When you're a kid, snow is fun, you know. Or even just like, you know, condensation on the inside of the windows, like making little faces on them and drawing, you know, boobs and dicks. And smiley faces, obviously, depends on the age. And just how different the weather is. This is fun, right? And yeah, and how we can use it as a play tool. And as I was thinking about all these different things, you know, like autumn and the leaves, and when you're a kid, it's, you know, you just think about the crunchiness, and especially if it's frosty and the leaves have fallen and you get the crunchy sounds, and you kick leaves, and then you're an adult and then you just realise that there's probably a dog poo under there somewhere. So you don't. And you know, spring always comes with like new plants and flowers come in, and autumn you get conkers as well, deadly weapons. And yeah, I was looking at the branches yesterday against the sky whilst all this was going on in my head, and I was thinking about what it must be like to be a tree, you know, like being blown around this way and that, and the possibility that a wind might come along and snap off one of your branches. And I was thinking about being a kid actually, and wind was, I mean, I grew up on the coast, so like wind really scared me for some reason. It was probably one of the very few things that I was scared of as a child. I wasn't scared of a lot of things, but I was scared of the wind. Like, it always felt like the most destructive kind of weather, that there wasn't really much that you could do about. Like, if you were out and about, wind gets everywhere, you know? And just that feeling of like being scared of the wind, and I'd forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about being scared of the wind. Even as like a young adult, I had an experience of sleep. I thought it was going to be an amazing experience of sleeping in a tree house in like this forest where the roof opened so you could see the sky. And I happened to go on a day where it was like this, and so for the whole night I didn't sleep, because the whole tree house that was on stilts, that was like, I'm not quite sure how it was done, but the stilts were kind of like slightly in the river, I think, from what I remember. And yeah, the whole night the fucking thing was just blowing, and I was like, I'm never gonna see my kids again, I'm not gonna survive. And yeah, I think that was the last time I was actually scared of the wind. It was and I thought about being a bird and how cool that would be, or not cool, I don't know. Like, I mean, they don't look very happy, the ones that are in that tree clinging on, to be fair. But you know, when you see birds and they use the wind to play and they glide and they dip and dive, how that would feel. And so I was looking at the branches yesterday. I keep getting distracted. And I started to write a poem about how pretty the branches looked against the sky. And as is usually the case with my brain, I went from one subject to another. And it took a really dark turn. It took a very dark turn, actually. And I thought about how a tree would feel in the wind, and looking at the different shapes that the branches make. And I saw like the swing on the tree, and I thought about, like, for some strange reason I was taken back to like witches and people being hung from trees, and how the poor trees must feel about that, you know. And then I thought about being a witch that was about to be condemned to death, and looking up and that being the last thing that I see, those branches against the sky. Told you, it took a very dark turn. It was, my brain tends to flip from subject to subject. And so my poem went from like being this really pretty thing about branches and the shape of them against the sky and the colour and the silhouettes, and it turned into like a bit of a purge of feelings about how it would feel to be fucking standing there about to like die, with everybody like looking at you laughing at you, and all these, you know, usually was the case, you know, these poor women and men were healers that had died. A lot of people had sought their wisdom and asked for their help, but didn't have the fucking balls to go, yeah, well, I went to that person, and you know, I used their services and they helped me a lot, actually. To have all those people like, you know, watching you about to die. And I thought about looking up at the sky in that moment and seeing the trees against the sky, and it all of a sudden it just felt okay. It just felt like if that was the last thing that I saw, if that was the last thing, just the contentment that I would feel and the peace looking up at the trees and, you know, seeing a bird flying past or a bird sitting in it, and just being in that and ignoring all the other fucking shit all the other shit that came with it. And then I realised that I wasn't scared of the wind anymore, and that was a nice feeling. I remember, like, when I was a kid, we used to have like really bad storms on the coast, like really windy, wild. I'm pretty certain I remember one day we stepped out of the door, like, my mum was holding my hand, and like, I swear my feet lifted off the ground. And in my head, like, it felt like she was holding on to me, and I was like, ah. Probably wasn't that dramatic. Like, kids do tend to over dramatize things. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was that, really. I was just thinking about how our mindset can change and how we can have things that we're scared of, like the wind. And that, you know, just depending on our circumstances, it can change. It can, what that makes us feel changes. And how kids, you know, depending on our circumstances or our situation or our age, or something can be like so fun and used as a play tool, or it can be something to just habitually complain about because everybody else is. It's like, if you're cold, just wear more clothes. Put a hat on. Or maybe turn your heating down in your house so that when you do step outside, it's not such a dramatic fucking change. I swear I go into some people's houses and it feels like stepping into an oven. We don't use the heating much in our house, which means that when we step outside, it's not quite so cold. And so I have another poem to read. I shall read it here in this video. I might make it separately too, I don't know. Birds. So so I have another poem to read today. It's not a long one. Two crows having an argument. That's funny. My branch. And also wind chimes. It always helps with the wind, you know? When you can hear them. It does make the wind a lot nicer. Yep, so I have another poem to read today. It's not a long one, it's only a short one. And it was inspired about that, like sort of, it's a bit dark, I know. Sort of your last moments, well, somebody's last moments. And looking up at the trees. And I'm gonna read it in this video, and then I probably might also make it a separate video as well. Just so it's on its own, so people don't have to listen to me talking about the wind. Okay, it's called One Last Look. She spent her time alone and sat, with only loyal friend a cat. He never judged or pointed at her love of healing this and that. She pondered on her social lack, grateful for the gift she had, was ostracised but never sad, although enough to drive her mad. Her wisdom sought by one wrong man, she saw the mob and off she ran. But persecution on the rack drowned 10 times her head in sack. Hung from neck, no tears held back, laughing faces, ridicule flash. What makes them good but her so bad? It was enough to drive her mad. She pleads to God, he answers back, I'll hold your hand, I always have. Take one last look at what you had. The sky dark blue, branches black, silhouettes, graceful attack, mirrors, veins and brain synapse, bronchial tubes where birds are sat. All that pain, and she's still not mad. beautiful, right? Yeah. So much gratitude for Gaia, for trees, for wind, and life and existence. And I suppose the thing to take from that is is perspective, really. It's just, what do you take from things? We all go through traumatic events, and we all go through pain and suffering at some point in our life, and we all have trials and tribulations, and but do you make it a reason to complain? Do you make it a reason to moan, or just habitually out of mindlessly just because? Or do you find something to be grateful for in it? Do you find the beauty in it? Do you see the other side of the coin? You know? Do you see it as something to complain about, or as a play tool to play with, to have fun with? And that's my video today. That was a little video about my ponderings about the weather. Yes, talked about the weather today. And wherever you are, I hope you're enjoying the weather. And you're finding a reason to smile. Even if it's only a brief one. And you're having a blessed day. I'm sending you lots of love and cozy cuddles, and I love you very much, and thank you for joining me and listening to my words and my poem. Mwah.